Thanks, Maggie. I appreciate that nice intro, and also a shout out to Lisa Ernst, Executive Director, for having me on this platform with Savvy Ladies. I mean, I just feel fortunate, along with other experts, to be able to help people during these difficult and challenging times. I know it's important that we all come together and help people who are really struggling. And, when I was first speaking with Lisa about this, one of the things is, even though I work, predominantly with individuals and couples with relationships, around marriage and divorce, dating, moving in together, life transitions, etc. What's really come up for me, because now all I'm doing is video therapy, obviously, since, Hoboken and New York City shut down, is a lot of fear and anxiety and also isolation that my clients are experiencing in different ways, different levels, different reasons, because they all have different life circumstances. And so when Lisa and I started to chat, what came up for us was in discussion was just, maybe talking more about the fear and anxiety that people are experiencing, how, what kind of skills and strategies can we talk about, or can I talk about and share with people to help them. And not just if you're living on your own. I think that's a different shift, and also rather than if you're living with somebody, but, regardless of that situation, together with somebody or individually, people are really experiencing a lot of fear and anxiety due to all the uncertainty and not really knowing what's going to happen in the future or even like day to day. And so, I think first it's important before I get started is to kind of normalize all of those feelings, right? That the fear, anxiety, loneliness, isolation, all of those things, feeling uncertain are certainly normal and to be expected during this challenging time. So I just really wanted to start with that. And so for today, as far as the format, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to talk a little bit about fear. I'm going to talk a little bit about anxiety, probably more about anxiety than fear, the differences, how our brain functions. And then going to spend the bulk of the time on skills and strategies, because I feel that people, we can talk about the fear and the anxiety, but I think that people really are looking for tools and things like takeaways that they can start to implement or start to use that would help them feel better in this unprecedented time. So I just wanted to start with that so that we can kind of, get an idea of what the webinar will be like. And that the strategies and skills will focus not just on behavioral changes, which I'm sure many of you have read about, but also the cognitive changes, right? The change in mindset, and how those two things, the behavioral part and the cognitive part, really work together very well to get you to a healthier place managing your fear and anxiety. So that being said, let's get started. So, fear, right? When we think about fear, well, we've all experienced fear in our lives, right? We can, defining fear is an immediate physical response to a specific threatening stimulus. So if we think about, a snake or a rat or any kind of situation, we become fearful, right? And our body goes into this fight, flight, or freeze. So either flight, you're either going to take off, you're going to freeze, you're going to stand there, feel immobilized, or you're going to fight, you're going to become maybe you're going to go after whatever it is, that fear that's provoking you. And our brain, what happens is it's just like a chain reaction in our brain, that we have this stimulus, right, that fear-provoking stimulus, and then our body responds by releasing stress hormones, like I mentioned, like cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol, which is like, trying to reduce the stress, and adrenaline to kind of get you moving if you decide to fight or flee. And then the other chemicals, the neurotransmitters, the chemicals that work in conjunction to help calm you down, are the serotonin, which many of us are familiar with. That's the feel-good neurotransmitter, the one that we get through exercise and meditation, eating certain foods, etc., as well as other neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. And all of these neurotransmitters, all these chemicals, they work together, right, to kind of to slow that brain down, or to do something to help the brain manage whatever that fear is, whatever fear you're facing. And so, like I said, so basically, these neurotransmitters, they're there to kind of help you function and to control your emotions. And then oftentimes, sometimes over long periods of time, which I'm going to get into more about the anxiety part, is that when you feel, out of control, overwhelmed in response to this, then whatever that fear is, oftentimes, that can also increase your anxiety. So when we're feeling good and we're not anxious and we're not fearful, for example, both parts of our central nervous system, the one that has fight, flight, or freeze, and then the other part of our central nervous system, which is the rest and relaxation, when we're feeling good, both of those are kind of working in unison, right? There's just like this well-oiled machine, and we have this nice feeling of homeostasis. But when we experience something in life, and the part of our system that's the fight, flight, or freeze takes over, then the goal is to do certain things, which we're going to talk about, that are going to start to employ that rest and relaxation part, because what the body wants to do is to manage that anxiety and that fear in a way that's going to bring you back to homeostasis. But when we have a situation such as we have right now with coronavirus, people have like this impending, these thoughts and these impending fears of what's going to happen in the future. And now a lot of those fears, because there's been more time that's gone by, has now turned into more chronic anxiety, which is, different than fear. So when we talk about anxiety, we talk about what is anxiety. So you can have anxious thoughts and feel really anxious about something that's going on, but anxiety is one of those things that is less intense but more sustained, right? And if not tackled, then it can become chronic over time. And there can be moments that maybe when you feel less anxious, but in a time such as this, we have a tendency to remain kind of like in that hypervigilant state, right? That state of feeling really overwhelmed and anxious all the time. And then what happens is, and then we just kind of stay there. And so one of the things that I don't know if maybe a little bit I did in this, talked about this, is that even though we may not always perceive that we may not always feel like there's a stimulus, sometimes, we still feel anxious. So sometimes we can feel that way without even really thinking about something. All of a sudden we kind of in this place where we're feeling really anxious a lot of the time, and maybe we don't even recognize that there is a stimulus, or maybe there is or maybe there is a stimulus. And so sometimes we can just feel anxious, in a chronic way. And then anxiety can take on something that it's just like this, what I term is like this vague sense of worry, right? This constant vague sense of worry that something bad and dangerous is going to happen, even though in that moment you might not feel like there's like this true stimuli. And just real quickly, this last thing I wrote is that, it doesn't really, the way that anxiety works is like this network in our brain. I think a long time ago, researchers thought maybe it was just coming from one area of our brain, but in fact, it's like this network of all these different things that are going on in our brain that really causes us to become anxious and stay that way. Okay, and then, so just like a little bit more about anxiety. So people don't not only experience the fear of what the uncertainty is going to be, but also for a lot of people that are experiencing like this more chronic long-term anxiety is just what's really going to happen about the future, right? It's not just what's going on in the world, or, it's really about, am I going to get this coronavirus? What's going to happen to my job? What's going to happen to my family? What about my friends? And, what about my financial issues? How am I going to manage all of these things? And so now it's just not the coronavirus, for example, it's like the collateral damage that comes from that, right? I mean, I'm sure people that are listening right now, yes, when we think about what are your fears, you think about like what are some of the fears that come up for you, or what are some of your anxious thoughts. And so we can have anxiety about the future, for example, and when are things going to open up, how are they going to look, but then all of a sudden it's like the other collateral damage. It's the other things that are going to come as a result of the coronavirus, right? It's like I said, it's, how will this impact me financially? How will this impact my friends? How will this impact my relationships? Or what about my family? Will I be returning to a job? Will my job change in any kind of capacity? And I think one of the biggest things that, I've been working with my clients is that it's really about a change in lifestyle, right? So, March, 14th, 15th, we were kind of going about and doing certain things, and next thing you know, six weeks later, whatever it's been, our life has been turned upside down, and what we knew was to be true before is no longer. And so how do you manage those thoughts that kind of can really get away from you? How does a person manage their fears without allowing them to kind of overtake you and overcome every single day, where you feel kind of immobilized or you feel kind of stuck in cement, you're not really sure what to do? Like, how do you manage all those anxious thoughts? Because the uncertainty is really what drives a lot of our anxiety, right? If someone said, by June 1, life is going to be normal again, then we could say psychologically, oh, I've got, X amount of weeks and I'm going to do this. And then June 1 is all going to go back to normal, whatever that is, right? But because there is no end date and because we do not know what things are going to look like, then it only drives us to be more anxious, even though we know that in many ways that can be unhealthy. But when we're in this world right now where there's so much uncertainty, our mind can really play tricks on us and really go into some really dark places. And so my hope today is not only to talk a little bit about that anxiety, but also give you some skills and strategies to maybe change some of the things that you're doing. And lastly, helping people manage their anxiety is not, it's also our perception of how we interpret those events, right? So if we're thinking about something in a specific way and based on our history and our life experiences, we're going to interpret something. So if, for example, I don't know, maybe you've had financial problems in the past, you've lost a job, or your friend is suffering or something like that. If you have experience with that, then you might be able to employ some of those skills. If you don't, then you might become more anxious because of those things. And how we cope with anxiety also is influenced by, which I'm going to talk a little bit more, is, how you're coping. Like, do you have healthy mechanisms? Are they unhealthy? Do you employ a good diet? Do you exercise? Do you have excessive worry? Is it difficult for you to take actionable steps? Do you have a tendency to kind of stay in your mind and stay anxious with that? So fear and anxiety are different. Anxiety is more chronic. Anxiety has a tendency to stay with us, and it's like this constant, nonstop worry about things that we don't feel we have control over. And then how we manage that anxiety and those fears says a lot about ourselves, our personality, our genetics, if we're more prone to being anxious. If someone is already anxious before this happened, well, that often magnifies their anxiety. If someone has less anxiety before the situation, they could be able to manage that in different ways, or it could even get worse for them. I mean, it could become something worse for them. You don't really know. We know that it's much to do about the combination of, like I said, genetics, personality, life experiences, and our perception of the events, and how we feel if we feel capable and competent or confident to manage our stress and anxiety. So real quickly, just some of the symptoms of anxiety. Maybe if you're looking at this list, maybe this is some of these things you can really identify with. I mean, I certainly know that my clients can identify with a lot of these things. Fear, right? Fear of the future, of their people. Feel helpless and hopeless, angry, sad, disappointed, frustrated, agitated. These are the things, this is how anxiety gets played out. There's change in sleeping and eating patterns. I mean, I'm sure that lots of you have read articles on people are having crazy dreams and wild dreams, and they're not sleeping as well, or they're sleeping too much, or they're eating a lot, or they're not eating. Maybe some of the habits that they used to have, they've kind of gone by the wayside. Certainly, there's difficulty in concentrating and focusing. And as far as in your time management. So you might have a lot of anxious thoughts, and you're unable to manage your time. You might start off with good intentions, but then all of a sudden you get distracted by your worry and your fears, and you really have a hard time concentrating, so that you have a hard time focusing on something like a project, a task, or something. For some people, physical symptoms, right? Stomach aches, back aches, headaches. That's all too common, right? Because when you have that stress and worry, those feelings of stress and worry have to go somewhere. And for some people, they internalize their stress, right? They might be emotionally eating. They internalize their stress and anxiety, so that they kind of have body aches and pains. They don't really want to get out of bed. They have headaches, all those physical symptoms that we think about. Another symptom of anxiety is rumination. That's constantly thinking about something. We ruminate over it over and over and over again, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk a little bit about when I get to skills, is how you can kind of dilute that a little bit and ruminate less on your anxiety. And stress is out of proportion to the impact of worry. Some stress is okay until it's not, right? So, some anxiety in life is good, because it helps us to hyper-focus and get things done. But in this time right now, there's too much, and then that doesn't really permit us to kind of move about our day and do things that we really want to do. Okay, and just a few more symptoms. Racing or unwanted thoughts. I'm sure lots of people have experience with that, or they know someone. And like I said earlier, irritability, restlessness, and for many people, just impending doom. Right? They just have this impending doom of, like maybe they might feel like the world is caving in, and they don't really know how to manage their worry. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but I just want to say a couple of things about this, and just kind of maybe summarize this one page. Is that the hippocampus in our brain, which stores all of our memories, and the amygdala, which is this real small almond-shaped part of our brain, which also stores memories, but the amygdala is primarily for our emotions and fear, etc. Why going through the coronavirus and experiencing this unprecedented time right now is like a trauma is because, well, first of all, our lives have been turned upside down, so we are all experiencing a trauma. And when we experience a trauma, we have a lot of other symptoms, and we also going through some grief. But one of the things with trauma is that the hippocampus and the amygdala, those two parts, they kind of get wedded, right? So the memory and the feeling kind of get wedded, and so with a trauma, what happens is you might have one or two stimuli that are going to reinforce this trauma that you're experiencing. But then as time goes on, there's more stimuli, right? So now it's not just we had shut down the restaurants. Now we're shutting down everything, and now we can't return to work, and then the subway isn't working, or we can't get on the subway. And then all of a sudden another stimuli might be we might be losing our job, or we might know someone who's losing their job. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't really take much for our brain to always be re-experiencing this trauma. So it's not just like one stimuli. After a while, those two things continuously have more stimuli that come into our brain that really provoke more of that trauma feeling. And so now we just have lots of things that we're thinking about that reinforce this really traumatic time in our lives. All right. So what I want to say is, despite all of that, before I get into the strategies, because I think the strategies in this time in our lives is really important, is that that we have a lot going on, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety. But I also like to remain hopeful, and helping people to have a little bit of hope, and in doing so, to feel like if they have some hope about their future and their lives, that they can feel more in control, right? So right now we feel out of control because we feel like everything is out of our control because things are so uncertain. But I'm a believer that we can make behavioral and cognitive changes that are sustainable, that can help you in life, but equally important, like right now, right? Because people want to feel hopeful, right? People, I'm sure you do too, you want to feel like, okay, if I'm feeling this doom and I'm feeling all this anxiety and all this fear, maybe there's something or some things I can start to do differently just to dilute that and water that down. the intention to manage your anxiety doesn't mean that you're not going to have any and that it's going to go away. The intention is, how can I live my life with a little bit less anxiety? How can I empower myself and do the things that I would like to do that are healthy and effective that will make me feel just a little bit better about the future? And so some of these might apply to you, some of these maybe won't work, but I do believe that if you practice them and that you are a willing participant in your own life and want to make some sustainable changes, ever so small, that you can really do these things. And so I just want to start off with a couple of things, right? So set teeny tiny goals through daily intention and weekly goals. What does this really mean? I mean, like a daily intention. It could be two or three. It could be as small as you want them to, as small as you want your daily intentions to be. I want to get up, I want to take a shower, I want to have a healthy breakfast. I want to, go for a 20-minute walk or 30-minute walk if you're able to do that. I want to reach out to one person. I want to make sure that I get this one task done. And it really doesn't have to be anything astronomical, right? We're not going to rewrite War and Peace. We're not going to, the lofty expectations that people often have about language and book and writing and doing all these different things. I understand people want to do those. I mean, I commend those people, but I also think that it makes other people feel bad, like they're not doing the same thing. And so if we just start with like teeny tiny goals, for example, and daily intentions. So maybe by the end of the week, I want to do this one task or two of these things, whatever that might be. That might be reaching out to somebody, going through a closet, picking up a new book, spending some quiet time with myself, by yourself. Do whatever really is going to bring you tangible results so that you can feel good about not just your day, but by your week, right? And so we set teeny tiny goals because those goals will be the ones that you're going to be able to attain. We often feel bad, I think, when we set these lofty goals and lofty expectations that we're going to be doing all of these things and we don't get to them, and then we end up feeling worse than we did in the beginning, right? We're like, oh my gosh, I got to do any of these things, and then we start becoming self-critical, and that's another whole rabbit hole that we go down. So I think that's really important. Create and maintain structure to ensure good time management. So to the degree that you can, right? So what does structure provide for us? It provides certainty. So we have a structure in our day and in our week, and it doesn't have to be, minute by minute. It could just be, here's my habit in the morning. When I get up, I do this, I do these three things. Here's my structure for the morning. Maybe my structure in the afternoon is a little bit different. Maybe my structure in the evening is a little bit different. And then the same thing for the weekend, right? Because, we have a lot of time. Now we have extra time on the weekend and from the weekends. And many people have more time during the week because either they're not working or they're not commuting, and we have all this extra time. And, what are you doing? And so how can you provide structure in your day to feel like you're a productive person and you feel good about it? And like I said, it doesn't have to be anything extremely lofty. It just has to work for you, right? This has to be something positive that you want to do for yourself. A couple of things we talked about, like the gift of distraction, right? I mean, look, distraction is good. You got to have something that's away from the coronavirus. So you got to have some conversations and doing some different things that are really not about the coronavirus. There's got to be some distraction that's going to let your mind just run freely and not really be thinking about anything, or watching something on Netflix, or reading something that's like a book that's kind of trashy, or doing something that's going to give you some kind of distraction, during the week or sometime during the day, that's just going to allow your mind to rest, right, and not to be always thinking. Obviously, these last three are things that we all, I'm sure, read about: maintain a healthy lifestyle, diet, exercise, fresh air. We're not, the diet is, are you making healthy choices 80% of the time or 90% of the time? Are you exercising to some degree? Can you do a video in your home? Can you walk around your block? Can you go for a walk? Are you able to get out and get some fresh air, even if it's like 10 or 15 minutes? Is there anything that you can do to encourage a healthy lifestyle at this time? Obviously, limit television time. I mean, I know people that, saturate themselves with TV. Why? I really don't know. I know some people want to just know every single thing. I kind of get that, but not really. I think it's really unhealthy. I just feel like the news, to a degree, is going to be what it's going to be. But for me personally, I read to be informed and educated, and that's not really a lot of information because I feel that I don't really want to read a lot of it. I mean, I read enough to feel satisfied. Maybe sometimes I read too much, and on the weekends I try to really check out. But everybody's different, but I think that really limiting your television time when it comes to news per se is really important. Television time, watching shows, etc. People are doing a lot of that. And then social media, obviously, right? Getting on Facebook, Instagram, or whatever you're going to be on, I think that's a great way to connect. However, I've heard from people that they get on, and everybody's doing all these projects, like I said earlier, and then they feel bad, or people are less isolated than they are. And I think that even before this, right, social media is good until it isn't. And I think that all of these things, whether that be distraction, television time regarding the news, social media, all in moderation, right? All that's really good for you. And you have to think about yourself and not anybody else, and what's really healthy and good for you. Reaching out, connect with family and friends, and I think this is important. I just contributed to an article on HuffPo, as a lot of other experts did, about other ways in which you can connect with family and friends and have different types of conversations instead of just always talking about the coronavirus, just asking them, like, how has your day been the last 24 hours? What kind of positive things are you doing? How are you spending your time? To have more engaging and more positive conversations rather than the demise of the world. And so I said, ask interesting questions to become interested in how they're spending their time. And I think that really goes both ways, right? So when I'm talking to a girlfriend of mine or friend and wondering how they're doing and so forth, it's really about, how else are they managing their time or what's going on in their life aside from, what's going on in the world. And then the next, some of these strategies, the ones I'm going to really be focusing on are a lot of cognitive behavioral with more cognitive changes, which I think are really important. So limit the space in your brain and what you ruminate and overthink about. So, don't go down the rabbit hole, right? So, look, the goal in rumination is to not have a limitless space in your brain where you allow yourself to think about all these negative things that make you anxious. And it's more about limited, right? I'm not asking people not to ruminate, not to think about things, but can you put a time limit on that? For example, if you allow your brain to always think about things, then if that's an option for you and you want to do that, then you'll always pick that option. However, if you start to train your brain, which we can do, to start thinking about how can I ruminate less? How can I set aside 30 minutes to think about this? And then I'm done thinking about this for 30 minutes. And then when that thought comes up again, kind of postponing, say I really don't want to think about that until like a later time. Because you can really redirect your brain not to ruminate, not to think about those types of things, right? We can seldom prevent the intrusive thoughts from coming in because we have hundreds and hundreds of those every day. But we subconsciously pick and choose the thoughts that we really want to focus in on. Next thing you know, we told ourselves the same narrative. We go down the rabbit hole. It's a half an hour later. It's an hour later. We're in this really icky, yucky place of a negative mindset. Whereas we can prevent ourselves from going down the rabbit hole and telling ourselves that narrative. Now, we can't always prevent ourselves from having the thought, but we can prevent how much time and energy we give it. We can also prevent how much time and energy we choose to ruminate about something. And that's just training your brain to think differently. It's just a change in mindset. One of the things that I have my clients also do is to write down 3 of the challenges that they're currently experiencing and think, and what would they look like if you overcame them? Like, what would be the solution to those things, right? So here are my 3 challenges, and then if I overcame these challenges, what would that look like? And what are the solutions to those? And then equally, it's important to think about like what strengths you bring, right? And are you using those strengths to your advantage? Because I often think that when we're really anxious, we have a tendency to think about all the ways in which we don't show up rather than the ways in which we do. And I think that we also have a tendency to think about all the things that we're anxious about rather than thinking about the things that we're not anxious about or some of the things that we have done to overcome our anxiety. And so I think that to help people balance things out, it's not just how people are challenged, but also like the good stuff, right? And like some of the strengths that they have that can really help them. So if you have a skill and maybe you're not using that skill as much as you could be, then maybe using that more often to help you manage your anxiety. And then, a few more, because I want to stay on task here as far as time. One of the most important things you can do is make a list of the things that are under your control. And that will really help you to become, more confident and be more hopeful, and it's very empowering. When we start to change our response to stress, we can shift our attitude. So although we might be able to change this current stressor, we can change how we perceive it and how we respond to it, right? So it's really important to think about what you can and what you cannot control, and then take actionable steps, however small they are, to increase our control, and then decrease our worry and our anxiety. So if we think about the things that we can control our day. We can control taking some actionable steps. We can control the structure, how we respond to stress, the kind of healthy lifestyle that we're employing. There are a lot of things that we can control that I think can be very, very empowering. And I think that when I talk about surrender, I think about surrendering to this uncertainty and letting go of trying to control the uncertainty, like what's going to happen, and then focusing in on, okay, so how can I use that time and energy to help me become less anxious and worry less? And I think that when we let go of things that we cannot control, it frees up a lot of time, energy, and space in our brain and in our life to focus on the things that we can control. And one thing that I didn't include on this, I realized when I was preparing my notes today on this PowerPoint, was that my experience has been that one of the things that really increases stress and anxiety is the people asking the what ifs of the world. What if this happens? What if this? And what if this? And I think that goes back to feeling like out of control and can also bring you down the rabbit hole. And then what I suggest to people is to actually answer those questions, like what if this were to happen, whatever it is. And then you want to answer that question, because by just allowing your brain to recycle all the questions, which people do, over and over and over again, it keeps people in a very emotional state. And the problem with that is that the way that our brain works is that we will the thoughts and feelings that we have to go through the emotional part of our brain before they can venture up to the rational part of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is all about problem solving, executive functioning, impulse control, etc. And so when we stay in these what ifs of the world, we really are keeping ourselves in this emotional state. And to our demise, it is not allowing us to tap into that rational part of our brain that can help us come up with solutions and answer these questions and problem solve. So if we just rummage through our brain and ruminate and think about all these scenarios and all these what ifs, the disservice that we have to ourselves is that we're actually not sitting down and thinking about what the answers are to the questions. Now, many people will say, I don't know. And I often find that that's a knee-jerk reaction, not to every single question, but to many. But if they really give themselves the bandwidth and they just sit down, maybe they grab a journal, maybe you grab a journal and you write out these questions, and then you really think about the answers, that really provides you a rational approach. And that taps into that part of the brain that has a solution and also a plan. So that when you have those what-if questions again, then you can go back and you can say, oh, I already came up with a plan for that. This is what my plan is going to be. But by not really providing yourself the opportunity to answer those questions, then people have a tendency to stay stuck in that emotional state. And really all that does is just keep them more hypervigilant, more stressed out, more worried, more anxious, and less control over their lives. And so I just feel strongly that that's the way that you can really feel, more in control of your life by doing that. And lastly, I just want to talk about hope. I mean, like I said in the beginning, I think it's important to have hope. I think that when people start to feel better about their lives, even by taking these really small steps, that maybe that will make you feel more hopeful, even if it's just like a very individual thing, hope that, that things will get better eventually, because they will. We don't really know when, but they will. I mean, we don't know what things are going to look like, but they're going to look like something. And to have hope about the little things that we can do in our life to make us feel better, and to feel like, we've got some, quote, skin in the game and some agency in our life, and that we can do some of these things that I talked about to help you overcome, your fear and to make you less anxious. We talk about gratitude and having gratitude for the things in our lives, and I know sometimes that's challenging, but I also believe we can hold two opposing thoughts. We can still have gratitude, and we can still feel sad and disappointed and fearful. I think it's all quite normal. And in my last slide, this is my contact information. If anybody wants to reach out, if you have some questions for me that you want me to answer offline, I'd be happy to do that. If you want to hop on a quick call, I'm happy to, quick chat, I'm happy to do that. One of the things that Maggie had said in the beginning when she introduced me was the chief behavioral specialist with Illumo, and it's a AI-powered, it's a artificial intelligence-powered app that we're going to be launching probably in the next week and a half. And it's an app to help people through all of their life stressors. And I just want to put that out, that if you're interested in being a beta tester, it's free. And if you recently experienced a heartbreak, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to be a beta tester. It's going to be a 30-day heartbreak app to help you to move through heartbreak. So if you know of anybody, if you're interested, please reach out to either me at my hello address on my website or at Illumo. And I think that's it. I'm done with mine. I don't know if anyone has any questions, or Maggie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dr. Davin. If you have a question now, you can use the chat box, or if you're on the phone, you can email info@savvyladies.org. And I'll start with the first question we received is asking, since things are changing constantly, I like to watch the news to stay informed, but I have noticed that it's stressing me out. Do you have some tips and advice for managing this when it comes to watching the news?
I think that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. I think, so first I would say, well, how would you define being informed, right? Everyone defines that differently. And so now you're being informed, but now it's stressful. And I've heard that from a lot of people. And so then I would ask, what is it that you need to know? And I would start with a very basic thing, right? So how much information do you think that you really have to know? Do you have to know every single article, or do you have to know what everyone's talking about? And so I think that for you, I might suggest, what is the bare minimum that you need to know that you would feel good about? And secondly, what has been your tipping point when you become stressed, right? So, for example, we're reading the news and we're doing all of these things, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, I'm so much more stressed out. And so then I would think, well, so what do you need to know, right? And then is that going to be enough for you? And if so, then just do that. And then what is your tipping point that you've realized that maybe you've read too much? Hope that helps.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so the next question is asking if it's possible to change your fight, flight, or freeze response. Can you rework your body or your brain so that you respond differently in different situations?
Right. So I think that's a great question also, and I think that you can. I think that the fear just comes from this one stimuli, right? And so then I would want to ask that person, what comes up for them that's really making them fearful. That's really tapping into that fear, and so if they're freezing, for example, why does that make them freeze in that moment? Or if they want to flee, why are they responding in that way to that fear? And then by taking more of a cognitive approach to that, then you can start to change how you're going to, how you're going to behave and how you're going to react, I should say, to that fear. Because what we do know is that you can rewire the brain in so many fundamental ways through changing your thoughts and changing your behaviors, especially your thoughts. That really is a key way to rewire your brain.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Another question for you is saying that you talked about what ifs. I'm worried. I'm more worried about my aging parents than myself. How can I stop myself from constantly worrying and thinking about those what ifs when it comes to them and it's not about me?
Right. So I think that's a great question too, and I've got elderly parents too, so I completely understand. I mean, my dad is 82. I have a stepmother who's, I wouldn't consider elder. She's, I think, 72. I'm not sure if that falls in that category or not. But anyway, I completely understand where you're coming from. And I think that one of the things with the what ifs, I think that I go back to, well, what are you worried? Like, what are the questions? What are the questions that you have, right? Right. What if what? What if they get the coronavirus? What if I can't get in touch with them? What if they have to go into a hospital, right? I'm not really sure what your questions are, but, I think about that with my father, for example. And then you really have to think about and answer those questions, like what if they were together? What would you do? What would you be able to do? What if they went into the hospital? What would you be able to do? And I think that by asking yourself, writing down all those questions, and then answering those questions, come up with a plan for yourself, right? Because here's the thing with worry and stress. It really does take away from living in the present, right? I mean, I think we all have experienced that. We can worry and stress all that we want, but it changes nothing, right? It will not change the outcome. And so what you want to do in these what if questions is to actually answer those questions and then come up with a plan. So that if you keep asking yourself, what if they get coronavirus? What if they get, then it's like, oh, I already have an answer for that. Here's my plan. And this is going to be just creating a new habit of reminding yourself that you still have a plan for that. Because when we don't answer the questions, we just stay in that worry state of mind, and things are going to be the way they're going to be, right? And so we don't have a lot of control over that. Even if I go back to the other person who asked about watching the news, it's really the same thing. I mean, you can watch the news and read the news and you can worry about all those what ifs, but at the end, right, I mean, how much control do you have over that? The numbers are going to be what they are. Things are going to open up when they do, correct? And all we can do is do things that are going to help us make healthier choices and live a healthier lifestyle, right? Limiting how much time we're watching TV, taking control over the things that we have control over. And when this person just asked about your elderly parents, it's about asking yourself those questions and answering and putting yourself in a position or getting a plan together around all those worries about her parents.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that helpful advice there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Davin, the last question for you is asking about the beta testers and just what's involved in that, and if you could just talk a little bit more about it and how someone could get involved.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the first app that we're launching, we're going to do beta testing, and a beta tester is someone who just signs up. It's free. You can go on our website, evolumo.com. I think there's a pop-up screen that says, do you want to become involved with the beta or something like that? And so I'm not, maybe it's a little too vague. And then you sign up, and then once the app is launched, then you become a beta tester. It's a 30-day journey through heartbreak, and so basically, the 30-day journey through heartbreak is every day. You'll take a selfie, and then there will be a behavior intervention, and then there will be a video that I will be doing, and pretty much I'll be like your person along your journey, like your coach along this journey of heartbreak, to help people move through their heartbreak. And so being a beta tester is really, we're testing, it's a testing out the app and seeing what kind of interventions work for people, what people like about it, and it's all really just to gather a lot of data about how people are moving through their heartbreak, where they're stuck, where they want to be, where they're not. And so the best thing to do is, it is illumo.com, but I think our email is info@illumo.com, which I didn't say. So I do believe, and if I know if you go on the website or if you do info@illumo.com, that will bring you to and then you can shoot us an email and let us know that you're interested. Or like I said, when you go on the website, there is a small pop-up box in the bottom right that pops up that asks you for. I think we ask you for your email address so we can send you information.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
yeah.
Great, and we'll send out that information in a follow-up email. We'll confirm all that so everyone gets that directly in their inbox. And
Perfect.
We'll also send out Dr. Davin's contact information. So those are all the questions that we have. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I want to thank you again, Dr. Davin, for a really helpful presentation during the coronavirus and helping us with our fear and anxiety. You had a lot of great tips in there for us, and we really appreciate it.
I appreciate your time and everybody who's coming out. And also, just lastly, really, if you have any questions or you thought about something later on, and you just want to shoot me an email, or you want to hop on a quick call, I mean, really, just don't hesitate. I'm certainly here to help, and any way that I can do that, I would be happy to help.
Okay, great. Thank you. We encourage everyone
thank you very
to take advantage of that. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.